He thought no one would ever find out. The lobby of the city's most prestigious hotel glowed like a palace that morning. Golden light spilled through towering glass windows, striking the marble floor until it gleamed like polished ivory. Chandeliers hung like constellations from a high ceiling, each crystal shimmering as though mocking him with their brilliance. Every detail of this place whispered wealth, power, control, and Adrien Cortez believed he owned it all. He walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit, the kind that announced his importance before he spoke a word. At his side clung Serena, a younger woman draped in silk, her perfume filling the air with an intoxicating sweetness. She leaned against him with practiced ease, the way someone wears a diamond necklace they know others will notice. Adrien smirked, his platinum card already between his fingers, ready to book the most expensive suite without blinking. This was his world, his playground of secrets. The staff knew his face. Bellboys straightened their jackets as he passed. Receptionists whispered his name under their breath. He thrived on their recognition, the bowing heads, the polite smiles, the silent acknowledgement of his status. Every step on that shining floor was confirmation that he could do as he pleased, and no one would dare challenge him. Until they did. Across the lobby, through the bustle of morning arrivals, a sound cut through, the sharp echo of heels against marble. Adrien's head turned, expecting another guest, perhaps a socialite or a dignitary he might nod to with feigned respect. But when his eyes found her, his smile faltered. Celeste. The breath caught in his throat. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not now. Not like this. His wife, the woman he had left behind, the one whose trust he had betrayed, was walking toward him. But she wasn't the fragile figure he remembered, broken by his lies. No, this Celeste was transformed. She wore a cream-colored suit that seemed to command the very light in the room. Her hair framed her face perfectly, her expression calm, composed, regal. There was no trace of the woman who had once waited for him by the window late at night. This was someone else entirely, someone untouchable. Adrien's hand trembled as he held out his platinum card to the receptionist, who suddenly hesitated. The young man behind the desk glanced nervously between the husband offering payment and the woman striding forward like she owned the ground beneath her feet. And in truth, she did. The whispers began almost instantly. Guests lowered their voices, but not enough to hide their fascination. "Isn't that his wife?" someone murmured. "Then who's the girl on his arm?" Another whispered. "No, she's not just his wife anymore. Haven't you heard? She owns the hotel now." The words rippled through the lobby like electricity, and Adrien felt them sting his skin. Serena pressed closer, oblivious at first, her manicured fingers gripping his arm. She leaned toward him, whispering flirtatiously, "Book us the suite with the view, darling." But when she noticed his face had drained of color, her smile faltered. Celeste's heels struck louder now, every step echoing like thunder in Adrien's chest. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't need to be. The silence she carried with her was more devastating than any accusation. Adrien's thoughts raced. He wanted to speak, to run, to disappear. He imagined the headlines, the shame, the empire he had built crumbling in the eyes of everyone who mattered. And in that instant he realized the truth. He wasn't the king of this empire anymore. He was nothing more than a man cornered by the consequences of his own choices. The staff stiffened, their eyes shifting toward Celeste with something Adrien had never noticed before: respect. Not the forced kind they gave him out of fear or obligation, but genuine admiration. Serena sensed it too, her grip loosening as the air around them shifted. The power Adrien once exuded now belonged entirely to the woman approaching him. And then the inevitable moment came. Celeste stopped a few feet away, her gaze fixed on him. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to expose him. Her silence carried everything. Adrien looked into her eyes and saw it all. His broken promises, his selfishness, his arrogance mirrored back at him. In that instant, every chandelier above seemed to dim. Every whisper seemed to swell, and Adrien Cortez realized the empire he thought he controlled had slipped from his hands long before this day. Serena stepped back, suddenly small in the shadow of Celeste's dignity. Adrien's world cracked, not with the sound of a slap or a shout, but with the quiet, devastating truth. He had lost. Before we go deeper into this powerful story of betrayal and redemption, take a moment to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. And let us know in the comments what lesson you think lies at the heart of this tale, because your words might inspire someone who truly needs them today. Now let's begin the story. Long before the chandeliers and the marble floors, there had been nothing but a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering bulb in the kitchen. Adrien Cortez was not always the man in custom suits. He was once a dreamer with nothing but ambition scribbled on scraps of paper and a fire in his eyes. And standing beside him, from the very beginning, was Celeste. She believed in him when no one else did. She saw past the empty wallet, past the long nights, past the failures, and saw the man he could become. On cold nights, she wrapped herself in his coat while he paced the floor, talking about the company he would build someday. And when he doubted himself, it was her quiet voice that steadied him. "Adrien, you were made for more, and I'll be with you until we get there." They married young, without a grand ceremony. Just two hearts promising each other forever in a small chapel with chipped wooden pews and sunlight filtering through stained glass. Adrien looked at her that day as though she was his entire world, and in truth she was. Their empire was built not on wealth, but on sacrifice. Adrien worked 3 jobs at once, loading trucks at dawn, waiting tables at night, and poring over business plans in between. Celeste carried her own weight, taking shifts at a bookstore, managing their meager finances, and somehow finding the strength to cook dinner and keep their home alive with warmth. Every milestone was theirs together. Their first office was a cramped one-room rental above a laundromat, the walls smelling of detergent and steam. Celeste painted the walls herself, white to make the room look bigger, while Adrien bought a used desk with money borrowed from a friend. They didn't have employees then. It was just them, side by side, working late into the night. Celeste typed letters, answered phones, and brewed coffee, while Adrien pitched ideas, knocked on doors, and heard no 100 times before anyone said yes. When that first yes finally came, a small contract worth less than their rent, Adrien scooped Celeste into his arms, spinning her around the office until they both collapsed in laughter on the floor. That night, they celebrated with takeout pizza and cheap champagne, and it felt like the world belonged to them. Slowly, their sacrifices bore fruit. The contracts grew bigger, the office expanded, employees filled the rooms. They bought their first home, a modest house with a backyard where Celeste planted roses. Adrien promised her that one day she would have everything she deserved, and for a time he meant it. But success has a way of changing people. With every deal signed, Adrien's hunger grew sharper. Where once he had been content with enough, now nothing was ever enough. His suits grew more expensive, his car sleeker, his gaze always fixed on the next conquest. Celeste saw the shift first in the little things. The anniversary he forgot because of a meeting. The dinners where his phone never left his hand. The nights when he didn't come home until dawn, smelling of cigars and champagne. At first, she forgave him. She told herself it was stress, the pressure of building something so big. She reminded herself of the man who once danced with her barefoot in their kitchen, who held her hand through every storm. But slowly, the warmth in his eyes vanished. The laughter that once filled their home was replaced by silence, the kind that cracks a woman's heart without making a sound. The empire they built together became Adrien's stage alone. At galas, he basked in attention, shaking hands with investors, while Celeste stood quietly at his side like a shadow. She smiled, but her heart ached. She had been his partner in everything, yet now she was treated as an accessory, polished, displayed, but forgotten. And then came Serena. She arrived at one of those glittering parties, dazzling in youth and confidence. Adrien's eyes lingered too long, his laugh too bright when she touched his arm. Celeste noticed. She always noticed. The late nights grew later, the excuses thinner, until the truth was undeniable. Lipstick on his collar that wasn't hers. receipts from hotels they'd never stayed in together, phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room. Adrien no longer even bothered to hide it well. Celeste's heart shattered in silence. She cried when no one could see, staring at the roses in their backyard, wondering when the man who once promised her the world had decided she wasn't enough. To the world, she remained perfect, the wife of a successful man, dressed impeccably, smiling graciously. But behind that smile was a woman crumbling piece by piece. Adrien, meanwhile, told himself lies. He convinced himself he deserved more, that Celeste didn't understand him anymore, that Serena's laughter was fresher, lighter, easier. He fed on the thrill of forbidden love, blind to the fact that he was trading gold for glitter. What he never realized was that while he was chasing illusions, Celeste was quietly gathering strength. She began investing on her own, using her intelligence, her instincts, and the same determination that had once built their empire. Every betrayal fueled her resolve. Every lonely night stitched together a new destiny. She did not scream. She did not fight. She built. And so, as Adrien spiraled deeper into arrogance and desire, Celeste prepared for the day when she would no longer be the woman left behind. She learned to build in secret, the way some people learn to breathe. Slowly at first, then without thinking. While Adrien celebrated deals under crystal chandeliers, Celeste was awake with a notebook on her knees, poring over balance sheets beneath the lamp's small, fierce light. She read everything: annual reports, investment primers, regulatory filings. Numbers that once felt like a foreign language began to make sense. Where Adrien saw trophies, she saw leverage. Where he saw glare and applause, she saw opportunities others had missed. Her first steps were small and almost laughably cautious. She opened brokerage accounts in names that meant nothing to the world, routing small sums from modest side projects she quietly launched, designed collaborations, curated pop-up events, a line of thoughtful stationery that sold out online. Each tiny profit she set aside like a seed. When the market dipped, she bought pieces of companies no one else valued anymore. A boutique hospitality brand losing ground, a local property under financial strain, a regional supplier with excellent fundamentals but poor management. She did not chase glamour. She chased value. There were nights when the weight of it all threatened to crush her. After a long day managing the household, after pretending at gala dinners and polishing Adrien's public image, she would return to a quiet room and allow herself a single hour of sorrow. She cried into the sleeve of her robe, a small, private ritual. Then she would straighten, make a cup of coffee, and begin again. Those hours were grainy and gray, the price of rebuilding. Pain sifted into patience. She learned to convert grief into strategy. She also learned to be invisible in plain sight. Celeste cultivated a network, mentors who owed favors, retired CFOs she met at a charity auction who agreed to teach her the art of capital structure, a sharp young lawyer she helped place at an internship who later became her confidant. She listened more than she spoke. She watched boardroom interactions like a chess player studying openings, learning where influence moved and how alliances formed. She took classes in the evenings on corporate governance and negotiation, sometimes sneaking away to libraries, while Adrien held court at yet another fundraising dinner. Each lesson was another brick in a wall she built around the life she intended to take back. Her investments were not just financial. They were moral and symbolic. She gave quietly to shelters and job training programs, tested social initiatives under the radar, and invested in neighborhoods Adrien's empire ignored. Each act of quiet charity had a double purpose. It healed her, and it created a web of goodwill that would later matter. People she helped remembered her when the press reshaped narratives. Business owners she supported became allies who vouched for her character when it counted. The slow accrual of assets taught her discipline. She learned not only to buy, but to transform. A battered boutique hotel she purchased for a fraction of its assumed worth became a training ground. She hired local managers, tested new service models, and quietly converted underused spaces into community hubs. Guests began to notice something different, an atmosphere of warmth, not pretense, of care, not show. Reviews spread slowly at first, then like a pleasant contagion. She did not broadcast any of it. The hotel was a laboratory for her ideas of dignity, how to create luxury without cruelty, how to run a business that respected employees, as well as profit margins. The legal maneuvers required finesse. Celeste structured holdings across trusts and entities to protect the assets she was accumulating. When she did make a direct move, buying blocks of shares in Adrien's company, quietly securing voting proxies, she did it with impeccable timing, never impulsive and never showy. She played by the rules so precisely that when the time came to act, there would be no scandal to discredit her. She kept her transactions immaculately documented, like a woman building an unassailable argument in paperwork rather than in raised voices. There were mistakes, hushed, private setbacks that taught her as much as any success. An early partnership soured when a supposed ally tried to take advantage of her compassion. A conservative investment yielded less than the math promised because of a hidden liability she had missed. She learned then to trust her instincts and to double-check every handshake. Each error taught her humility and sharpened her resolve. She would not be sentimental about money, but she would not be cruel either. She understood how wealth could become a cage as easily as a key. Her transformation was not merely financial. She sharpened her presence. Where she once softened to accommodate others' egos, she now practiced saying no in the mirror, a small, startling exercise that made her spine straighter each day. She took a public speaking course to reclaim the voice she had muffled for the sake of harmony. She learned the language of leadership, measured pauses, concise directives, and the ability to hold an audience's attention without needing to be the loudest person in the room. The turning point arrived not with a single dramatic move, but with a careful collection of smaller ones aligning. When an unexpected vacancy opened on the board of a major hospitality trust, an institution Adrien had long admired, she positioned herself not as a vengeful outsider, but as a steward who could rescue value and restore reputation. Her case was clinical: operational improvements, staff welfare initiatives, a plan to rebrand under a concept of restorative luxury. The board, hungry for stability and scandal-averse, found in her someone who could deliver both profit and peace. She was invited in. From inside, she quietly executed a strategy many would later call audacious. She consolidated holdings, negotiated for controlling interest in key subsidiaries, and leveraged relationships she had built in underserved communities to reimagine the brand's mission. She improved staff pay structures, instituted educational programs for employees, and funneled profits into service models that boosted both morale and margins. What she built was a business that could be proud of its bottom line and its humanity. The day she signed the final papers to acquire controlling interest in the hotel that once symbolized Adrien's unchallenged power, she felt an odd mix of exhaustion and elation. It was not triumph in the shallow sense. There was no gloating, no spectacle. Instead, it was a quiet recognition of work done and wounds transformed into wisdom. She thought of the small apartment with its flickering bulb, of the nights bent over spreadsheets, of the roses she tended in the backyard. She understood finally that power could be reclaimed without breaking one's own soul. By the time she walked into that hotel lobby months later, it wasn't only that she owned the building on paper. She had revived its purpose. The chandeliers now reflected more than wealth. They reflected an ethic, a place where second chances were not marketing copy, but policy. And when her heels struck the marble that morning, the sound was not revenge. It was the cadence of a woman who had rebuilt herself from heartbreak into leadership, slow, deliberate, and brilliantly, devastatingly composed. The air inside the lobby seemed to thicken as Celeste's heels echoed louder, each step reverberating against marble like the countdown of a clock only Adrien could hear. To the guests around them, time slowed. Conversations softened to murmurs. The rustle of newspapers and clinking of coffee cups faded until there was nothing but the measured rhythm of her approach. Adrien's world, once so expansive, so controlled, suddenly shrank to the space between him and the woman he had betrayed. He tried to breathe, but his chest tightened as though the weight of the chandeliers above had descended upon him. The platinum card in his hand slipped slightly, dampened by sweat, and the young receptionist noticed. For the first time in years, Adrien Cortez, the man who always carried himself like a king, looked human, vulnerable, and the staff saw it. Serena, still linked to his arm, sensed the shift too. Her bright smile faltered as her eyes darted from Adrien's ashen face to the poised figure moving steadily closer. "What's wrong?" she whispered, her voice suddenly thin. She tried to grip his arm tighter, as if holding him could anchor the power slipping from him. But Adrien's arm trembled beneath her fingers. Celeste did not rush. She did not falter. Each step was deliberate, her gaze locked on him with the calmness of someone who no longer needed answers. She didn't come to accuse or to demand. She came to reveal, to make him see himself through the mirror of her strength. Guests leaned in, whispering furiously. "That's his wife," someone said. "No, more than that. Haven't you heard? She owns this place now." A collective gasp rippled across the floor. Suddenly, the staff's deference to Adrien shifted, their eyes subtly but unmistakably aligning toward Celeste. The empire of respect he had always commanded evaporated, reassembling around her like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Adrien's thoughts spiraled. He remembered the promises he had made to Celeste in their youth, promises whispered in tiny kitchens with flickering bulbs. He remembered the way she once looked at him, like he was her entire future. And now, here she was, radiant and unshaken, while he stood exposed, clinging to a woman who felt suddenly like a cheap accessory in the light of Celeste's dignity. Serena's insecurities spread like cracks across porcelain. She shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the hem of her silk dress, her bright confidence dimming under the quiet storm in Celeste's eyes. She leaned closer to Adrien again, this time whispering harshly, "Who is she? Why is everyone looking at her?" Her question was answered not by Adrien, but by the silence of the room. Even Serena could feel it. The power no longer belonged to her glittering companion. Celeste stopped just a breath away, the click of her final step ringing out like a gavel. She stood tall, her cream suit glowing in the lobby's golden light, her chin tilted not in arrogance, but in unbreakable poise. She said nothing. She didn't have to. The silence that poured from her was sharper than any accusation. Adrien's mouth opened, desperate to fill that silence. "Celeste, the words caught. He wanted to say it wasn't what it looked like, that Serena was nothing, that he could explain. But every excuse dissolved on his tongue, because deep down, he knew explanations were meaningless now. The evidence of his betrayal was not in words, but in years of actions. The receptionist shifted awkwardly, his hand hovering above the card reader, glancing between the trembling man and the composed woman before him. He didn't know whether to swipe Adrien's platinum card or bow to Celeste. It was Celeste who freed him from the hesitation, not with words, but with the softest nod, a signal that required no explanation. She was in charge now. Adrien felt the stares digging into him, each one a spotlight exposing his shame. The chandeliers no longer glimmered with promise. They glared down at him, harsh and unforgiving. His suit, once a symbol of dominance, suddenly felt heavy, suffocating, like a costume he could no longer wear. Serena tried to reclaim some ground. She straightened, flicked her hair, and slid her arm more tightly around Adrien's waist, forcing a smile toward Celeste. But the effort only highlighted the contrast, youth and vanity beside dignity and strength. No one in the lobby admired Serena in that moment. They pitied her. Celeste finally let her gaze drift, not at Adrien, not at Serena, but at the empire around them. The polished floor, the glittering chandeliers, the watchful staff. All of it was hers now, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. The weight of her quiet triumph filled the space, pressing Adrien further into insignificance. Adrien's knees threatened to buckle. His entire body screamed to run, to escape the unbearable truth. The empire he thought he controlled was already hers. The loyalty of those around him already shifted. The dignity of the woman he had discarded now shining brighter than anything Serena's beauty or his money could offer. Celeste didn't humiliate him. She didn't lash out. She didn't need to. Her silence was the verdict, her composure the sentence. She turned her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him, with a finality sharper than a blade. Then she pivoted gracefully, her heel striking the marble once more as she moved past him, leaving Adrien stranded in the ruins of his pride. The moment she passed, the whispers rose louder, like a wave crashing down. Serena's grip slipped entirely, her painted smile trembling. Adrien remained frozen, staring at the spot where Celeste had stood, feeling the collapse of everything he once believed was unshakable. For him, time remained frozen in that lobby, a moment that would replay in his mind forever. For her, time moved on. Celeste's story had already left him behind. The silence of the hotel lobby lingered in Adrien's ears long after Celeste walked past him, even when the whispers dissolved into the usual hum of luxury. Even when Serena's perfume still clung faintly to his suit, he felt utterly abandoned, as though every chandelier, every polished marble tile had turned its back on him. He left quickly, dragging Serena by the wrist, but nothing he did could shake the weight of what had just happened. That night, his mansion felt larger than ever. The grand halls echoed with emptiness, his footsteps bouncing back at him like accusations. He poured himself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid trembling in his hand. He sank into the leather chair in his study, the same chair where he had once dreamed of conquering the world, and for the first time, it felt wrong. The walls seemed closer, suffocating. The framed awards on the shelves mocked him. The silence was deafening. He closed his eyes and saw her. Not Serena, never Serena, but Celeste. The way she used to bring him coffee in mismatched mugs. The way she used to laugh when they danced barefoot in their tiny apartment. The way she once believed in him, so fiercely it made him believe it himself. He remembered promises whispered against her hair, vows made when all they had were dreams. And then he remembered how easily he had traded those promises for fleeting thrills. Serena lingered in the mansion for a few more weeks, but even she grew restless. The glitter she had once chased dulled quickly in Adrien's hands. Without the confidence, without the aura of power, he was just a man consumed by regret. One morning, she packed her bags quietly, leaving behind only the faint trace of her perfume and a note that said, "This isn't what I signed up for." Adrien didn't chase her. He didn't even care. Because deep down, he knew she was never the point. The woman who mattered was gone, and she hadn't left in anger. She had left in triumph. Meanwhile, across the city, Celeste thrived. The hotel Adrien once flaunted as a symbol of status became, under her leadership, something greater. She walked its corridors not as a silent ornament, but as a visionary. Staff greeted her with genuine smiles, not forced politeness. She knew their names, asked about their families, remembered their stories. For the first time, they felt seen, and their loyalty blossomed in ways money alone could never buy. The chandeliers still sparkled, but they now reflected more than wealth. They reflected her philosophy, resilience, dignity, transformation. Guests who checked and found more than luxury. They found a place that breathed second chances. Celeste initiated programs that shocked the industry. She opened training centers within the hotel for single mothers, veterans, and young people without connections. She believed that a hotel could be more than polished marble and expensive suites. It could be a sanctuary where broken stories found new beginnings. And people noticed. Articles in glossy magazines began to appear. The woman who redefined luxury. Celeste Cortez, a phoenix of the hospitality world. Guests spoke not only of the service, but of the spirit. Celebrities endorsed her, investors respected her, and the world began to see her not as Adrien's wife, but as Celeste in her own right. Adrien read every article. Alone in his study, he clipped them out and stared at her pictures, at her confident smile framed by headlines praising her brilliance. Each word was another nail in the coffin of his pride. Once he would have scoffed, convinced he deserved the credit. Now, he could only bow his head and whisper the truth to himself. She had done what he never could. She had built something lasting. His empire, the one he thought unshakable, began to crack. Investors withdrew. Partners distanced themselves, and slowly, Adrien's name stopped carrying weight. In boardrooms where he was once the center of attention, chairs emptied. In restaurants where he was once ushered to the best table, hosts now checked reservations twice before offering a seat. His downfall wasn't dramatic or public. It was quiet, like sand slipping through his fingers. Celeste, on the other hand, only rose higher. She introduced changes that made headlines. An annual gala at the hotel raised millions for shelters. A scholarship program for hospitality students drew admiration worldwide. What Adrien had built as a monument to his ego, Celeste transformed into a legacy of resilience. One afternoon, Adrien returned to the hotel, not as its ruler, but as a guest. He walked through the lobby with hesitant steps, the marble echoing beneath his worn shoes. The chandeliers still glittered, but he could no longer feel their warmth. Staff nodded politely, but without recognition. He was just another man passing through. At the center of the lobby, he saw her again. Celeste, surrounded by staff and guests who leaned toward her, their admiration obvious. She was listening, laughing, alive in a way she never had been when she stood at his side. Adrien froze, struck by the realization that she was no longer a figure in his story. He was a footnote in hers. He didn't approach her. He couldn't. He turned away before she saw him, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the life he once dismissed had bloomed without him. Celeste noticed, of course. She always noticed. But she didn't call out to him, didn't stop him. She simply continued, her heels striking the marble with the same unshakable rhythm as before, because her story was no longer about him. It was about her. And so, Adrien wandered through the emptiness of his mansion, haunted by echoes of laughter that would never return, while Celeste's hotel glowed brighter with each passing day. In the end, Adrien became a ghost in the very city he once commanded. Celeste became its light. The city never stopped moving, but Adrien did. In the quiet corners of his empty mansion, he replayed his mistakes like an endless reel. Nights once filled with laughter were now haunted by silence. The walls that had witnessed ambition now echoed with regret. He wandered from room to room like a ghost in a palace that no longer felt like home. Each chandelier reminded him of Celeste, the light she carried, the strength he had overlooked. Each unopened door reminded him of the promises he had broken, promises that had once been the foundation of their shared dream. Adrien finally understood the cruelest truth of all. Empires made of stone and glass can crumble, but the empire of trust, once destroyed, is almost impossible to rebuild. Meanwhile, across town, the same chandeliers glittered differently under Celeste's leadership. They no longer symbolized arrogance or excess. They reflected her quiet dignity, her unshaken spirit. What had once been a monument to Adrien's ego had become a cathedral of resilience. The guests who walked her halls didn't just marvel at luxury. They felt it. The kind of luxury that came not from gold or silk, but from the comfort of being welcomed, the dignity of being seen. Celeste stood often at the tall windows overlooking the city. From that vantage point, she saw the skyline Adrien once claimed as his own, and she understood something he never had. True power was never about owning more. It was about lifting more. It was about creating spaces where others could rise, too. Her story became a quiet legend. Staff whispered it to new hires. Investors told it in boardrooms. Guests carried it home, like a parable. This was the hotel built on betrayal, but reborn through resilience. And at the center of it all was Celeste, not as a victim, not as a woman consumed by revenge, but as a symbol of transformation. Adrien saw it all from afar. He read her name in newspapers, watched interviews where she spoke with calm conviction about leadership, dignity, and second chances. Each word was a reminder of the woman he had underestimated, the partner he had once dismissed. He envied her success, yes, but more than that, he envied her peace, because she had built something no money could buy: freedom. The lesson of their story was not carved in the marble floors or hung in the chandeliers. It was carved in the choices they made. Adrien's life was a warning. When you trade gold for glitter, you will always be left holding dust. When you mistake lust for love, applause for loyalty, control for respect, you build not an empire, but a cage. Celeste's life, in contrast, was a lesson in quiet power. She showed that dignity can be louder than rage, that silence can be sharper than words, and that betrayal can become the very soil in which resilience grows. She was the rose that bloomed in the ruins of heartbreak, proving that sometimes the most devastating endings can become the most extraordinary beginnings. Life is a mirror, and in Celeste's eyes, Adrien had seen himself clearly for the first time. But it was too late. The mirror had shattered, and while Celeste picked up the shards and built something new, Adrien was left only with the cuts of his own reflection. And so the world moved on. Guests checked into the hotel, marveling at its grace. Families found comfort in its walls. Dreamers found inspiration in its story. And Adrien remained in his mansion, a silent man living among echoes, watching a city he no longer ruled. Perhaps the greatest punishment was not losing the hotel, not losing Serena, not even losing his reputation. Perhaps the greatest punishment was simply seeing what he could have had: love that endured, partnership that thrived, a legacy built with integrity, and knowing he had thrown it all away. But the greatest triumph was not his downfall. It was Celeste's rise. She chose not to destroy him, but to outgrow him. She chose not to scream, but to stand. And in that choice, she reminded the world that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and yet it changes everything. As the sun set through the tall windows of her hotel, casting golden light across marble and glass, Celeste stood tall, not as Adrien's wife, not as the woman left behind, but as herself, reborn, radiant, and free. And that is the moral the story leaves behind. Empires built on lies will crumble, but dignity endures. Love may break, trust may shatter, but resilience can turn ruins into palaces. In the end, revenge is fleeting, but transformation is forever. So ask yourself, when life betrays you, when the world underestimates you, when someone you trust breaks your heart, will you crumble, or will you rise, as Celeste did, and become your own strength? If this story has touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of love, betrayal, and redemption. And before you go, comment below, what lesson from Celeste's journey will you carry into your own life? Because sometimes, your words may be the seed of strength for someone else. And as Celeste once proved, sometimes the greatest victory is not in tearing down the person who hurt you, but in building something greater, until the world can no longer see you as broken, but only as reborn.